So we have known about this list of Switch 1 games that will be getting free Switch 2 upgrades, meaning any of the Switch games that you own in your library, if you boot them up on or after June 5th on your Nintendo Switch 2, they will automatically get an enhancement. But up to this point in time, Nintendo has been very vague in terms of what these enhancements might look like. And we now have a detailed breakdown game by game of what each game and sometimes sections of games, yes, are getting certain enhancements while another portion of the game content is not. So there's some interesting precedents being set here, and I also want to dive into the conversation around what kind of continued support we might see Nintendo do, because obviously this is wave 1 of free Switch 1 game upgrades for Switch 2, but doesn't necessarily stop here. And there's actually a lot to be excited about in this list. Some games even getting specific screenshots already sharing the enhancements, and we're talking about legitimately enhancing in some cases the overall player experience, even in terms of things like how many characters or creatures can be rendered on screen at once in some cases. So we're going to get on the same page with all of these details, but before we do, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your bell notification to join Sunbro Nation if you're new here, and stick around for a quick word from today's video sponsor. Have you ever wished you could turn your best friend or significant other into the hero of their very own RPG but don't know where to start? That's exactly what RPGme.ai is for. It lets you create a custom pixel art RPG based entirely off someone's personalities, hobbies, and even those inside jokes only the two of you understand. It's an awesome gift idea and super easy to make. You just upload a photo, answer a few quick questions, and RPG Me takes care of the rest. You'll get a playable, personalized game you can share through a link, or go full nostalgia mode and hand it off in a custom retro style box, which I consider to be the obvious choice. And yes, they'll even include a scannable QR cartridge that launches the game instantly. It works on desktop or mobile too, so anyone can play anytime, anywhere. RPGme.ai is now live on Kickstarter, and you can go explore the various different packages they have available to back this game yourself. I hope you're looking forward to your own customized RPG adventure like I am. Help support the brands that support me and check out RPGme.ai in the pinned comment and description down below. Big thank you to RPGme.ai for sponsoring today's video. Okay, so I want to first kick it off right over at Nintendo's own website, where they do have this detailed page which was recently updated, where it says free updates for select Nintendo Switch games. Free updates to enhance the gameplay experience on Nintendo Switch 2 system will be released for select Nintendo Switch games. By connecting your Nintendo Switch 2 to the internet and performing a system update, you can download free updates for selected games that may improve graphics or add support for features such as game share. The contents of these free updates will differ depending on the game, and sometimes they will actually differ in the same game, which we'll highlight that one in just a moment. So ARMS right at the top of the list, kicking us off. You have this. Of course, all of these are existing Switch games that will be out and available for play with these updates on June 5th. So none of the games that we're going to go over have a date any later than that, so we won't mention the date outside of this first one. But this particular update for ARMS includes visuals optimized for Nintendo Switch 2 display and high-resolution TVs for improved image quality, and you have frame rate optimized for Nintendo Switch 2 for smoother movement even when playing with 3 or more players, and HDR support. So of course, Nintendo is being a little vague in terms of the actual exact what this will run at. Like, is it going to be 4K 60? And my mindset is probably yes, for just how powerful of a jump forward the Switch 1 is to the Switch 2. I think when we're seeing these optimized or improved visuals, improved resolution type of statements, I think that they are going to go 4K 60. But what we haven't seen any mention of, and I would be surprised to see it in select games, would be something like 1080p, 120 FPS. I don't think Nintendo necessarily goes there for many of the Switch 1 games, but it is, of course, possible. ARMS is a game that, of course, launched with the original Nintendo Switch. There is a demo available if you never checked it out that you can choose to hop into that game. And then Brain vs. Brain, Big Academy from there, kind of a good basically outline of what it looks like when you're just going to get very minimal updates to a game, because on this particular one you have up to 4 people can now play in party mode, and you have share locally or share online via game chat. And my big worry with this entire list, when we're talking about the list of upgrades for something like Big Brain Academy, is actually the fact that we didn't know if many of these games would get such a limited update, like, oh, now it just works to share locally or share online via game chat, like with the game share feature, because we did know that that would be technically a new feature set that's coming to select Switch 1 games. And if that's all that, most of these updates were, it wouldn't actually be that much of a good news scenario. But as we continue on down the list here, Captain Toad Treasure Tracker next up, you have visuals optimized for Nintendo Switch 2 display and high resolution TVs for improved image quality, so higher resolution, HDR support, game share support. 2 people can play all of the courses, share locally or share online via game chat. So nice little update for Captain Toad Treasure Tracker. Clubhouse Games 51. This is another simple update. Up to 4 people can now play 34 games, and you can share it locally or share online via game chat. Game Builder Garage, you have visuals optimized for Nintendo Switch 2, which has a higher resolution and higher image quality, supports Joy-Con 2 mouse controls. So this is the first game that we've seen on the list so far, and that does indeed mean, yes, certain games Nintendo can go back and enable mouse controls on Switch 1 games. Now, there is a whole host of titles from a first-party and third-party perspective that you could probably think about that would make a good fit for updating with mouse controls, and I will be curious to see if Game Builder Garage is the first of many to come. I would love to see Super Mario Maker 2 get an update for mouse controls, especially in builder mode. Obviously, that would be a huge enhancement, because while the builder tool set and everything you had available to you was more advanced on Super Mario Maker 2, there was definitely a pocket of players that enjoyed Super Mario Maker 1 on the Wii U because of the gamepad and the functionality with that. And while mouse controls maybe wouldn't bring it straight to the gamepad level of support, it would still be a nice enhancement. And it's just cool to see a game that's already out there actually get something like Joy-Con mouse controls enabled via an update, because again, it opens the door for this to potentially happen for other Nintendo Switch games that it makes sense for. Because while we will dive into this in a moment, I don't think Nintendo is necessarily done with the game updates past this initial wave. Okay, new Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe. This one is just getting visuals, so optimized for Nintendo Switch 2 display and higher resolution TVs. We're probably getting 4K 60 for Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe. You have Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. These are big ones I really want to spend just a little bit of time on, and we do have some nice screenshots to look at of the new versions, because obviously when Pokemon Scarlet and Violet came out, and even past patches, like they're still broken. It is not necessarily as bad as it was as at launch to have like game breaking glitches and stuff and characters falling through the world and all those janky things that you saw clips flying around on the internet. That doesn't necessarily happen anymore. But one thing that is very apparent if you play these otherwise very enjoyable games, when you're traversing through a big open world, there's multiple Pokemon on the screen, the frame rate completely chugs and falls apart. Now the textures, certain things are just not going to be saved with any type of update, but from a performance and playability standpoint, these are probably 2 of the games that needed this more than any others on the list that we will mention. And just to first cover the official updates, optimized for Nintendo Switch 2 display with high resolution TVs for improved image quality, so it's going to run at a better resolution, and then improved smoother movement on Nintendo Switch 2, so the frame rate will indeed be better. So I think 4K 60 is what we're looking at for Scarlet and Violet, and I would also like to highlight these screenshots shared over from Central Leaks, where you can get a little bit better of a look, because it is worth noting here that things just noticeably look better. Now, I would like to really highlight how even some textures have been upgraded here, because while the buildings are here in the top of this first picture we are looking at, they are there and crystal clear and smooth on the Nintendo Switch 2 version. So there's definitely on these skyscrapers and like the type of reflections that it couldn't even render in, they look like buildings that actually have glass and have reflections now. Now, this is still not mind-blowing visuals by any stretch of the imagination. This is Game Freak we're talking about, but you can see a noticeable upgrade in this side-by-side comparison screenshot, which is really nice to see. Not to mention, and this is a big functionality increase and a big upgrade for Pokemon players out there, especially if you shiny hunt and things like that, you can have significantly more Pokemon on screen rendered in the world in real time than you would see in the Switch 1 version that we've been playing up to this point in time. So this makes me feel a little bit better about my decision to wait on finishing Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. I have not finished those games, and I haven't purchased the DLC. So I now have a reason to kind of hop through them and experience them in a better state than they once were. as they were released, and even with some patches later on. Look at the amount of Pokemon. I think people doing comparisons online were spotting, you know, I mean, in this looks like more than 33% more, but I was seeing a lot of talk online go around roughly an average of 33% more Pokemon rendered in all at once in any given moment in the Nintendo Switch 2 version. You can see, of course, the more sharp clarity of like the grass textures compared to the Switch 1. Things look sharper, things look better. It's going to run right, and it's going to stay at a stable frame rate. This is a big win and what we needed for Scarlet and Violet this entire time. Unfortunately, Nintendo is not locking these behind a paywall because it would be kind of absurd if they did. So these are a round of the free upgrades and part of these free enhancements that we're seeing for Switch 2 games, or Switch 1 games on Switch 2 rather. Super Mario World, 3D World rather, plus Bowser's Fury. This is the one I want to really highlight for a minute as far as certain content's getting an update, the other one not entirely across the board. So you have visuals optimized for Nintendo Switch 2 display. Okay, better frame rate, better resolution. We have both of those things confirmed. HDR support, Bowser's Fury only. Yeah, Nintendo actually excluded doing HDR for Super Mario 3D World, but they're including it for Bowser's Fury. Really interesting decision in my opinion. You do have like frame rate optimized movement on Nintendo Switch 2, including Bowser's Fury. This one, Bowser's Fury only. So I'm taking that as frame rates boosted on both of these, but HDR is only there for Bowser's Fury. Why that's a distinction, I don't know. Also, you'll probably notice that a lot of these games we've looked at so far have not gotten an HDR upgrade. Captain Toad Treasure Tracker being one of them that did, and ARMS did as well. But there's a number of games that also didn't get HDR support, although I would say some of these you could argue maybe you're not going to really notice them that much. But yes, HDR support only in Bowser's Fury in this case. I really found that to be an interesting choice by Nintendo. Game share support, up to 4 people can play Super Mario 3D World. In Bowser's Fury, 2 people can play together, with one player controlling Mario and the other controlling Bowser Jr. Share locally or share online via game chat. Okay, Super Mario Odyssey, a big one that a lot of people will be excited to play through again on the Switch 2. Better resolution, HDR support, 2 people can play together with one player controlling Mario, the other one controlling Cappy, and share locally or share online via game chat. So Mario Odyssey, you know, we're waiting for the next 3D Mario clearly at this point, but it is cool to see this one at least get some kind of notable upgrade, and the HDR support will be nice to see what it looks like in handheld mode and things like that. Kind of a reason just to go back to this and experience Odyssey at least a little bit. I probably won't replay the whole thing or anything, but I may hop in there for a little while, and it'll probably tie me over just a little bit until that next major 3D Mario game. Continuing on down the list, and these are kind of the last that are going to close us out, but also ones that very much needed these upgrades that we are getting. So you have The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, visuals optimized for the Nintendo Switch 2 resolution, so higher resolution and HDR support. And what is interesting about the frame rate on these games is that they run at a unlocked frame rate currently. So while they could go up to 60 frames per second in certain cases, of course with Echoes of Wisdom most recently, and Link's Awakening was known for this as well, you would get into a more heavy area with a lot of enemies on screen, and absolutely, I mean, the frame rate chugged. It would go beneath 30 for sure, but you would really notice it falling off of that 60 frames, going down to 30, beneath 30 even, and really just struggling in certain areas of the bigger overworld map and things like that. Well, the nice thing about it, just taking advantage of the Switch 2's power, is that it will likely run at a solid 4K 60, and that's fully what I'm expecting for these games. Both of them are getting HDR support, which is awesome. If you haven't played Echoes of Wisdom yet, it's even better time to hop into it, because now those overworld complaints about performance dragging will be a thing of the past, and not to mention with the amount of echoes and things that you could summon on screen at once, it could get a little hairy in Echoes of Wisdom in terms of creating slowdown and lag and noticeable, you know, hiccups for the game. These are all things that we can now look towards, you know, really being streamlined and figured out in the Nintendo Switch 2 generation. And I really love to see the number of initial games for free that we have seen so far. Obviously, there are plenty of additional games that we would hope would get updates in the future. Super Mario Wonder comes to mind as a perfect candidate to get HDR support. You know, clearly a 4K 60 version of that game would be beautiful, and I definitely hope we get that as a free update. Maybe they do additional content, because I don't necessarily think Nintendo is done doing Switch 2 versions of Switch 1 games. Just like Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, Those are big ones at the launch of the console, but there's nothing that's stopping Nintendo from handpicking a few more big Nintendo Switch successes in terms of, you know, very successful software and updating it and giving it a more meaningful update and giving you that $10 upgrade pack, especially if they add in some kind of additional functionality or content to it. And we've seen, you know, Kirby and the Forgotten Land getting new content and things like that, in addition to Super Mario Party Jamboree. And there is, you know, a reason for a handful of Nintendo Switch games to actually get that same kind of treatment, get DLC content, $20 more, you get it looking and running better, and enjoy the new expanded content on it. So it's pretty cool to think of the possibilities that in addition to brand new first party exclusive Nintendo Switch 2 games, we still have reason to get excited about some of our back library and maybe go back to and play these games again, or pick them up for the first time, as there will be, of course, a large percentage of people that are just getting into the Nintendo Switch ecosystem for the first time with the Switch 2 if they skipped out on the Switch 1. And now you have a better version of some of the classic games that we've enjoyed over the last 8 years on the Nintendo Switch console. So good news all around on this one. There's definitely some nitpicks with Nintendo not doing across the board updates for all of these games. And obviously, in a perfect world, if they did HDR, better frame rate, and better visuals for every game, that would be ideal. But all things considered, for a list of free updates that Nintendo doesn't necessarily have to do the work for, I do like to see this. So let me know in the comments down below how you feel about these free Nintendo Switch 1 upgrades for Switch 2, and will you be hopping back into any games or picking up any games for the Switch 1 that you don't own right now so you can enjoy them in a better playable resolution and frame rate on the Switch 2 with things like HDR support? And are you like me and you're gonna actually hop back into Scarlet and Violet and maybe finish those games this time around with their big performance patches that were long overdue from Nintendo? So make sure you share all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below before you leave, regardless if we agree or disagree. Also, make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell. And with that, I've been Sunbro, you've been Nation. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.